Yeah. Yep. What's that? Yep. Took care of Joe. Took care of Hugh Janus as well. They're gone. Yeah. Yep. Okay. Cool. Catch you later. Oh, well, didn't see you there. Hello. I'm just gonna cut straight to the chase here because, quite frankly, I made a whole 15-minute video as the intro to this myth here, so I'll leave a link for that. So if you remember correctly, just to catch you up to speed, I was talking about the Nightfall time group that they have for this myth, or at least that's under the ownership of Mopherius, and he's got a few sections to that group. However, one of the sections is called Creatures. There is a total of 4, however, for the sake of this episode, I guess you could call it, we're going to focus on Beettsy and Beettsy. Starting off with Beettsy, because, you see, I'm not exactly sure chronologically how the games are supposed to go, since I wasn't able to open up that next door in the Storytime question mark game. But if I had to guess, this would be the closest starting point. The game's simply called Ma Crib. At first glance, it's a pretty simple game, nothing really to it, just a chill swamp area. However, as you progress through the game, it becomes more and more apparent how this will sort of connect to the lore. Let the fireflies be your guide through the dark. Basically, just follow the fireflies through this little parkour area, and you'll eventually reach the next teleport, but however, there are a few interesting things to note on the way there. Mainly this sort of narration that goes on, basically giving a little bit of a backstory and insight, if you will, onto what's going on with this sort of what they call their dream, supposedly. If you were to find all of the actual text around near the parkour area and all the way till the end, they would read out the following. Follow me, my child, for I am your guidance. I will teach you my ways to save this condemned land and convert it into a place we belong. Therefore, you were gifted with that capacity to change this land and turn our dreams into reality. What it looks like to me is this land is condemned. Okay, yes, amazing analysis. Moving on. No, I'm joking. If you notice around the map, especially in the water area, there's several dead animals, which I believe to be fish, and overall, especially if you get to the very end of the sentence, the last text, there's a deceased crow, and it overall just looks like the entire area is dead, decrepit, and it's just sort of got this eerie vibe to it, where something isn't quite right, and to that end, I believe it is that, simply put, life is unsustainable in this sort of world. But how did this come to pass? Well, let's continue. If you stray away from the path of the fireflies, you will actually, on the island portion, after the parkour, come across some sort of intriguing lore here about the bee court and sort of what has gone on with this entity. There's this insignia that's known as the bee court symbol, which represents each queen bee with their respective color. There's also this passage about how apparently the queen's unrest had resulted in major issues in the colony, but despite that, they were also not allowed to call for external help due to trust issues. And finally, I'll read to you what I can, but it's sort of cut off. Can help a bee carry a lot of nectar, though in order to progress, we must go against our own nature. Collecting, unfortunately, that's all we get for the lore in this game, which is, there's a bunch more scrolls there. If they would just open up to me, please, I beg of you. So it appears some sort of conundrum has gone on, where the bees were having a sort of internal issue. At least one of the queens was having an issue with their colony, and they were experimenting with new ways to collect nectar, I believe it was. The final thing in this game is actually quite intriguing. It's basically the final text saying, please trust the man with white eyes. And as you know, the man with white eyes, we believe to be sort of the entity that has been responsible for the disappearance of the missing man, as along with all the other travesties that have gone on relating to this myth. With a statement like this, it's hard to make out what exactly it's trying to tell us. I personally want to believe that they're trying to say that the man with white eyes is actually a good sort of entity. It's not here to harm us. At the same time, though, I've seen sort of events that transpire in the other games in story time that prove otherwise, and you'll see events in the following games that also prove otherwise. However, we can't judge a book by its cover just yet. We have to go deeper. After reading that text and moving forward, you get teleported to a game called Ruins. Now, this game's actually not made by Beettsy, but also actually made by Beettsy, the second character that I wanted to discuss. In this game, you're heading down a raft, basically down just a slope or sort of maybe a river, and you come across this ruin, this wreckage of sorts. But it all looks quite familiar. Because where have I seen that big ol' M before? Where have I seen that red-tinted brick there? What in the gods? What in the... Wait a minute. If you guessed the old Storytime location, specifically the one that's in the thumbnail of the game and in the YouTube video that was discussed last episode, then yeah, you would be correct. You'd be absolutely correct. This also sort of goes to coincide with the actual sort of theory that the description of Storytime, the current description being a memory of what it once was, suggests that this place was actually rebuilt from the ground up. And until now, we haven't had any actual confirmation as to why that happened. But it appears now that it's, well, simply put, it's been ruined. I'll admit, this game, I had some difficulty actually interpreting what it was trying to convey, but I'll give you the evidence of basically what I found and the facts of them. In the middle of the river, there's a book that says, "A Fable About Bees?" ? In the left corner, hiding in a little bush, there's this little fella. He looks to be wearing, I believe, isn't that the Loki helmet? The crown, I guess you could call it? I don't know, but regardless, I'm not actually sure who this character is. I've never seen them before. We also have a map here, and to be honest, at first I thought this was like a flank route, like this was some military tactics type stuff going on right here, but it's obviously not. It's simply just a journey. If you remember correctly, when you spawned into Storytime, the island itself is quite small. I don't think that was for convenience sake, for the sake of building the world. I think that was lore relevant, and it's basically reflected in this map here. If you also remember, in the spawn, there was actually, right behind where you spawn usually, there's a boat. So, I'm not trying to suggest that this is accurate at all. However, it's basically all I've got right now. I'm sorry, but like, it seems to make the most sense, basically. If you also notice, the man with the white eyes, he is watching. He is indeed watching, up on the cliffside. It seems like he's also got his gaze directed at the figure in the bush. There's also a cage hanging above a tree, and upon closer inspection, there's actually just a candle sitting in there. I tried to see if I could maybe get to it to touch it, perhaps it was a teleport. However, the skybox just had other ideas, other plans for me. So here's where we get to the whole sort of, this is the main game I wanted to talk about today. It's known as Beettsy's Place, however, it's a combination of different games, and this is just the first one out of all those. So, there's a lot to break down here, and I'll simply start by noting the fact that Hallucination, the game originally from Storytime, is actually here as well, which basically gives us a link between this game and the actual Storytime game. It should also be noted that on the box, the insignia, this sort of symbol that's on those boxes near the Hallucination teleport, it actually belongs to another creator, another game, that could or could not actually be related to this sort of extensive myth lore. Now, there's a whole string of games related to this dimensional facility. However, I believe those aren't really that important. What is important, though, is the YouTube channel Dimensions Facility that basically details some very interesting, did I say very interesting things? My apologies. Very, very interesting things. Their first YouTube video, Log 1, details that one of their workers actually died on the job due to the dimensional a sort of dimensional breach happening. They go into more detail calling it the monster dimension, and how the way it worked is that dimensions facilities was supposed to connect to the other dimensions. However, in this case, that dimension, the monster's dimension, connected to them. The second YouTube video, called About Us, basically goes into detail about what their goals are. What is Dimensions Division or Dimensions Facility trying to accomplish here? Dimensions Facility, basically what their goal is to simply protect the current dimension from any exterior threats from other dimensions, aka what we just heard about in log 1. Now, why this is actually important is, despite it being a very minuscule part of the lore, it could be, just a theory, could be that our current man with white eyes monster could be from this dimension. I also theorized that it could be a curse of some sort. However, if this is indeed lore relevant, this sort of dimensions facility, it could prove that the man with white eyes is indeed not a curse, but a physical entity that came from this monster's dimension. There's just some stuff I don't know that much about. But anyways, moving on from that, it's Alaris. Remember that kid from the picture frame in good old-fashioned story time? They're here. They're picking flowers, which is all nice and stuff, except there seems to be a little bit of a problem here. The bees. The bees have come about, and, well, they're just doing regular bee things, pollinating flowers, but something's a little off here. Aside from the hallucination teleport having several bees being covered in this black muck, sort of, it seems that some of the flowers around the area are being described as putrid. They usually, all yellow flowers have some black spots on them, predominantly black spots. It seems when some bees try to pollinate the flowers, this sort of happens. Now, if you look closely, there is a bee attached to the flower that Alaris is currently picking, and it's really easy to miss, but there's an audio clip that plays when you first spawn into this game. I'll try and sum it up best I can. I don't want to play it because copyright, good old copyright. Let me tell you, when you first get into the game, you can hear the sound of something breaking, child going ouch, and then the man going, "Damn you, child, leave this house immediately." The child then goes on to pick flowers and notices, hey, the bees are out, and then followed by yet another ouch. It is assumed that the child is stung. So basically, it's sort of depicting that the current situation that is unfolding in this game, oh, I'm sorry, Roblox, I'm sorry, in this Roblox experience is that Alaris has gotten stung by a bee. Now, this wouldn't normally be a problem, the kids would just cry a bunch, like, oh my god, I've been stung by a bee, I'm going to go into cardiac arrest. However, in this case, it's a problem, because the bees are infected with this sort of black sludge, something that's a foreign substance of sorts that, well, we have no clue what it could do. And now also another interesting fact, going around to the back of the house and jumping onto the window sill, you can actually enter the house and see, hey, look who it is. It's our good old friend, the missing man. Well. Okay, so Alaris and the missing man are at this house, and yes, the man with white eyes is also there, unknowingly to the missing man, standing on the table, staring right at him. The missing man seems to be distraught, pissed off, if you will, at sort of something. At first I thought it was the bees, but then, remember, the audio clip that first plays, I can safely assume, I believe, he is mad about the fact that Alaris broke something, and he's still heated about that. I'm gonna stop it right there. I don't got a catchphrase. Goodbye.